Loneliness is complicated. A new town, a new job, a breakup, depression, social anxiety, low self-esteem, no friends. Sometimes it's one of these things. Sometimes it's all of them. And sometimes it's none. For some, loneliness is a season. Brief, understandable, something that eventually fades. For others, it lingers quietly in the background, without reason, without warning, without words. That's what makes loneliness so hard to talk about. It's not always logical, it's not always visible, and it doesn't always have a cure. If you search the word loneliness online, the first definition that appears is sadness because one has no friends or company. But we both know it's more complicated than that. The great psychologist Carl Jung once wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." Loneliness, then, isn't always about others. Sometimes it's about you. The parts of yourself you've silenced, ignored, or forgotten. So maybe the question isn't, how do I stop being lonely? Maybe it's, how do I find myself again, even when I'm alone? Because the truth is, loneliness isn't just an emptiness to escape. It's a message, a quiet invitation to look inward, and finally, start listening. We spend our lives giving time to everyone and everything else, to our jobs, our relationships, our screens, our ambitions, but rarely do we give time to the one person who needs our attention the most, the self beneath all the noise. Imagine your life as a glass jar filled with water. Every conversation, every expectation, every role you play adds a little bit of dust, a little bit of sand. Over time, the water becomes cloudy, murky with thoughts, emotions, and noise. You can no longer see the bottom of the jar, just as you can no longer see yourself clearly. Being alone is the moment you finally set the jar down. You stop shaking it. You stop trying to fix, explain, perform, or please. And as you rest, as you allow stillness to return, the dust slowly settles. The reflection becomes visible again. That's what solitude really is. Not an escape from life, but a return to it. When the noise outside fades, the sounds within grow louder. The voice of your intuition, the whisper of your spirit, the soft ache of wounds asking to be healed. It's the most important meeting you'll ever have, a meeting with yourself. And that's when you remember, the most valuable time you'll ever spend isn't with people who demand your attention. It's with the person quietly waiting for your presence all along. We live in a world where our senses are constantly bombarded. Notifications, conversations, background noise, and the endless hum of other people's opinions. We are surrounded by interaction, yet quietly disconnected from ourselves. Every moment of stillness feels uncomfortable, so we rush to fill it with scrolling, music, podcasts, anything that keeps us from hearing our own thoughts. Why? Because silence makes us aware of the things we've been avoiding. It forces us to listen to our inner voice, and that voice, for many of us, is filled with unresolved emotions, questions, and fears. Most people mistake solitude for loneliness, but they are not the same. Loneliness is being cut off from others. Solitude is reconnecting with yourself. Loneliness drains you. Solitude restores you. Loneliness says, "I need someone else to complete me." Solitude says, "I am already whole." Yet we've been conditioned to see solitude as failure. We live in a culture that glorifies constant connection, where being busy, social, and visible equals success. But if we're honest, it's not the world's judgment we're afraid of. It's our own. When we strip away the noise, we face ourselves, and that can be terrifying. For the first time, we notice how restless we are, how much of our identity is built on other people's approval, how often we've used company to avoid confrontation with our own mind. But the truth is, the discomfort you feel in solitude isn't emptiness, It's detox. It's the withdrawal from the noise of the world. It's your mind recalibrating after years of overstimulation. Think about it. How often do you sit in silence, without a phone, without music, without anyone else's thoughts filling your head? Most of us haven't done that in years. We fill every gap with stimulation because we've forgotten how to simply exist. And yet, silence has a way of revealing the truth. In stillness, we start to notice what actually matters. The tension between who we are and who we pretend to be. The things we keep doing that don't feel right anymore. The relationships that exhaust us. The dreams we've postponed. That's why solitude is so powerful and so uncomfortable. It shows us the gap between the life we live and the life we want. But what if we stopped running from that discomfort? What if we saw solitude not as a punishment, but as an invitation? Because that's what it is. Solitude is the mind's way of calling you home. It's not there to remind you of what's missing. It's there to remind you of what's within. When you begin to spend time alone, you realize something profound. You're not empty. You're full. Full of unexpressed thoughts, creativity, and potential that's been buried beneath constant distraction. So, no, solitude isn't failure. It's freedom. It's not the absence of connection. It's the presence of clarity. And maybe, just maybe, the quiet you fear most is exactly where your healing begins. Modern neuroscience has revealed something extraordinary. Moments of solitude literally heal the brain. When you step away from constant interaction, the noise, the messages, the expectations, something remarkable happens inside your mind. The brain's default mode network reactivates. This network, responsible for self-reflection, emotional processing, and creative insight, only lights up when we are alone and unfocused, when we let our thoughts wander freely. In other words, when you disconnect from others, your mind finally reconnects with itself. It's a state where your brain organizes emotions, rewrites memories, and integrates experiences into meaning. It's how you make sense of who you are and where you're going. Without solitude, this system stays dormant, drowned by the constant flood of external noise. A striking study from the University of Virginia revealed just how uncomfortable modern humans are with stillness. When left alone with their thoughts for only 15 minutes, most participants preferred to shock themselves rather than sit in silence. Imagine that. We'd rather feel pain than face our own minds. That's not weakness, it's conditioning. From a young age, we're taught that connection equals worth. If your phone is quiet, you must be irrelevant. If no one texts, maybe you've done something wrong. We've been wired to equate stimulation with significance, but solitude reverses that conditioning. It heals by giving your nervous system permission to rest, by allowing your senses and emotions to slow down from constant alertness. That's what solitude does. It lets the chaos settle so you can finally see what's underneath. Not the surface version of yourself that performs for others, but the quiet, authentic self that exists beneath the noise. In that quiet, emotions that were once overwhelming start to organize themselves. Stress begins to dissipate. Your thoughts, once scattered, start forming coherent patterns again. Physiologically, heart rate slows, cortisol drops, and the brain releases alpha waves, the rhythm of calm focus and creativity. The result? Clarity. In solitude, you begin to see not only who you are, but who you are not. You start noticing what drains you, what inspires you, what matters. It's as if the mind, exhausted from years of external input, finally exhales. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He called it the process of individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are, apart from the masks and roles society has given you. Individuation doesn't happen in crowds. It unfolds in moments of quiet awareness, when you stop being what the world expects and start remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. That's why solitude isn't about cutting people off. It's about coming home to your inner voice. In solitude, the mind stops performing and starts integrating. It pieces together the fragmented parts of you, the neglected emotions, the forgotten dreams, the buried creativity, and slowly weaves them into wholeness. So the next time you find yourself alone, resist the urge to fill the silence. Sit with it. Let your brain do what it was designed to do: restore, repair, and reconnect. Because in that stillness, you're not withdrawing from the world. You're recharging your ability to meet it fully. And perhaps that's the real secret of solitude. It doesn't isolate you from life. It prepares you to live it with more clarity, depth, and compassion than ever before. Let's explore the 3 gifts of solitude, the rewards waiting quietly behind the discomfort of silence. Solitude clears the fog. In the constant hum of daily life, our minds become cluttered with opinions, expectations, and background noise. Everyone seems to have a voice in our decisions: what to do, who to be, how to live. But when you're finally alone, all those voices fade, and one remains: your own. In that silence, you begin to hear yourself again. You start to realize that much of your confusion doesn't come from not knowing the answer. It comes from hearing too many. Solitude filters out the static. It helps you recognize what's yours and what you've absorbed from others. Decisions become easier when they're not filtered through the fear of judgment. You no longer ask, "What will they think?" but rather, "What feels right?" The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." Solitude is where you refine those thoughts, where you stop reacting to life and start responding to it intentionally. When you spend time alone, you begin to see the patterns that drive you, the habits, the emotional triggers, the quiet desires. You gain perspective, and from that perspective, clarity grows like light breaking through morning fog. The second gift of solitude is creativity. Throughout history, the world's greatest thinkers, artists, and innovators, Newton, Beethoven, Jung, Van Gogh, all sought solitude not to escape the world, but to understand it. Because creation requires stillness. Inspiration doesn't shout. It whispers. And to hear it, you must be quiet. In solitude, imagination is free to wander. The mind, no longer burdened by distraction, begins to make new connections. Scientists call this the incubation period, the mental space where ideas evolve naturally, without pressure. It's the moment when insight arrives unexpectedly, like a spark in darkness. Newton discovered gravity alone in his garden. Beethoven composed masterpieces in silence, hearing music not through his ears, but his mind. Jung retreated to his tower at Bollingen to write, dream, and paint, reconnecting with his unconscious. When you're alone, the world slows down enough for your thoughts to dance. That's where creativity lives, not in constant stimulation, but in reflection. Modern research supports this too. Studies show that people who spend regular time alone demonstrate higher levels of originality and problem-solving. The brain, when not overloaded, enters a state of default mode thinking, a fertile ground for imagination. Solitude, then, is not isolation from creation. It's the soil it grows in. When you embrace it, you begin to see that silence isn't empty. It's full of ideas, inspiration, and possibilities waiting to be noticed. The third and most profound gift of solitude is self-connection. The deepest relationship you will ever have is the one with yourself. Yet, for most people, it's the one most neglected. We spend our lives building connections outward, to family, friends, lovers, careers, but rarely turn inward to ask, Who am I beneath all this? When you learn to enjoy your own presence, you stop chasing validation. You no longer look to others to tell you who you are. You begin to trust your inner compass. In solitude, you meet yourself without masks, without the performance, without the persona. Jung believed this meeting was essential for wholeness. He described it beautifully. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. That's what solitude does. It awakens you. It reintroduces you to the parts of yourself you've silenced, your curiosity, your intuition, your vulnerability. And when you become comfortable in your own company, the world no longer feels as threatening. You stop trying to fill every quiet moment with someone else's noise. You begin to treat solitude not as loneliness, but as luxury, a sacred time to refuel, reflect, and realign. Self-connection also brings peace, because when you know yourself deeply, you stop seeking from others what only you can give. You no longer need constant reassurance or approval. Instead, you move through the world with a quiet confidence, a calmness that comes from being rooted in your own essence. Solitude, then, is not an escape. It's an encounter. It's where clarity sharpens your vision, creativity expands your mind, and self-connection strengthens your soul. When you embrace these three gifts, you begin to understand that being alone isn't something to survive. It's something to savor. Because in the silence, you don't lose yourself. You finally find yourself. True abundance isn't about having more. It's about needing less. We live in a culture that equates worth with accumulation. More friends, more followers, more possessions, more experiences. Everywhere you turn, the message is the same. You are not enough until you have more. But solitude teaches you the opposite. It reveals that peace doesn't come from adding things to your life. It comes from subtracting the noise that keeps you from hearing yourself. The more comfortable you are being alone, the less power others have over your peace. You no longer chase attention because you've found connection within. You don't need constant validation or approval because solitude has taught you how to trust your own presence. It's a quiet kind of freedom, one that can't be bought, taught, or performed. It's the moment you realize you don't have to earn rest, happiness, or love. You just have to stop outsourcing it. Solitude transforms loneliness into self-respect. It rewires the way you relate to yourself. In the beginning, the silence feels heavy. You crave distraction. You reach for your phone. You want to run. But if you stay, if you breathe through the discomfort, something begins to shift. You start realizing that the emptiness you feared isn't a void. It's space. And that space is sacred. It's where you begin to understand that your value was never dependent on anyone's presence or attention. When you can sit quietly with yourself and feel whole, that's when you've truly healed. That's when loneliness turns into solitude, and solitude turns into serenity. You no longer seek love as validation. You give love as overflow, not because you're empty and need filling, but because you're full and wish to share. You begin to love differently too, from wholeness instead of need. You stop clinging, stop performing, stop bending yourself to fit others' expectations. You discover that love rooted in fear of loss is never love at all. It's attachment. Real love is freedom, the freedom to care without control, to give without depletion. The Stoics had a word for this kind of self-sufficiency: autarkeia, the state of being content with oneself, independent of external circumstances. It doesn't mean rejecting the world or living in isolation. It means knowing that your peace is self-generated, that the world within you is enough, even when the world outside is uncertain. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." That's the essence of autarkeia. It's not a denial of connection, but a redefinition of it. You can engage deeply with others without losing yourself. You can love the world without depending on it for meaning. The person who has cultivated autarkia walks through life differently, slower, calmer, less reactive. They don't rush to fill every silence, don't chase every approval, don't panic when things fall apart. Because their foundation is internal. They've learned that the only true security is inner stability. Modern society tells us that happiness is a race, that fulfillment is somewhere at the finish line of success, wealth, or recognition. But the more we chase more, the emptier we feel. Because every time we get what we wanted, the finish line moves. The brain adapts, the excitement fades, and we start running again. It's an endless treadmill of desire. Solitude pulls you off that treadmill. It slows you down long enough to ask, why am I running in the first place? It reminds you that there is power in enough. Enough friends who understand you. Enough experiences to make you grateful. Enough possessions to meet your needs. Enough self-awareness to rest in your own company. When you embrace enough, you step out of comparison. You stop measuring your life against others. You stop confusing abundance with excess. And in that moment, something extraordinary happens. Peace becomes effortless. True freedom isn't found in having everything. It's in realizing you already have enough. It's the serenity that comes when you no longer resist what is, when you stop chasing and start appreciating. In solitude, you learn that you were never broken, only distracted. That you were never missing something outside of you, only disconnected from what was within. The moment you feel at home in your own presence, the world around you becomes lighter. Relationships become richer because they're built on choice, not need. Work becomes easier because it no longer defines your worth. You discover that peace isn't a prize you earn after solving life's chaos. It's a state you access when you stop adding to it. The freedom of enough. It's not the absence of desire, but the mastery of it. Not the rejection of the world, but the realization that the world inside you is already vast, beautiful, and complete. And maybe that's the final lesson of solitude, that you never needed more to be whole. You only needed to remember that you were enough all along. When life starts to feel heavy, when the noise becomes too much, don't rush to fill the silence. Sit in it. Let it wrap around you. Because healing doesn't happen in the chaos of doing. It happens in the stillness of being. Silence is not the absence of life. It's the space where life begins to breathe again. When you stop running from the quiet, you realize it was never chasing you. It was waiting for you to come home. Solitude isn't loneliness. It's remembering who you are when no one's watching. It's the gentle art of sitting with your own thoughts and finding peace there. And sometimes, the most profound connection you'll ever make isn't with another person. It's with the silence within you. That silence isn't empty. It's full of clarity, truth, and presence. It's the voice that guides you back to yourself, whispering, "You are enough." So the next time the world feels too loud, pause, turn off the noise, take a deep breath, and listen. Not to the world, but to the stillness that lives beneath it. Because in that silence, you don't lose yourself. You finally find yourself.